We're here at Conner Prairie in Fishers, Indiana today, and Conner Prairie is a special place. Everything they do here is in first person. So this episode will be a little bit different. I'm gonna have to pretend like I'm in the 19th century. Here we go. Ma'am, I am so parched.
Ah, well, sir, you've come to the right place. This is the Golden Eagle Inn. I'm Martha Zimmerman. Who am I speaking to, sir?
I am Mr. Townsend. I am traveling up north, but I'm here preparing for this trip.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet you. Why don't you join me in our tap room here?
I would love to.
So, Mr. Townsend, I have something very special here.
Okay.
This is a beer that is very near and dear to my family. It's called Pennsylvania Swankey.
It sounds interesting. I don't think I've had Pennsylvania Swankey.
I don't think very many people outside of Pennsylvania have had it, sir. So I'll give you a small glass to start, and we'll see if you'd like more.
Certainly. Would you join me?
Oh, why, certainly I would.
Oh, yes. That is very refreshing. I don't know if I have those flavors right there. What is in this?
Well, it would be much easier to actually show you. In fact, I'm brewing today. And to defray the cost of the beer that I've just poured, if you'd like to help.
I'm very interested in being able to take beverages with me, and if I have to make my own, I have to.
Well, so why don't we go into the kitchen and we'll make some Pennsylvania Swankey right now.
That would be wonderful. I'll follow you.
All right. So we have most of what we need here to make Pennsylvania Swankey, which is what you tried. It's a recipe that my mutter and Oma, my mother and grandmother, made in Pennsylvania. And I suspect that not very many people drink it very much anymore, but I find it very refreshing.
I certainly did.
And what's unique about Swankey is that it's flavored with something very unique. It's flavored with star anise or star anise, and it is aniseed from the same.
It's from the same plant. Okay.
Yes, and so it gives a bit of a licorice flavor.
Oh yes,
and it tends to cool the mouth, and so it's very nice in the summertime. So what we'll do, if you wouldn't mind helping.
Oh, of course, of course.
Take about 5 or 6 of the star anise, and I would say most of the seed there that you have for the mortar and pestle, beat them, not savagely, sir.
Vigorously?
A kind beating.
Yeah.
A kind beating.
There we
just
are.
to break up. Yes, and just open that, the smell of the spice. Let me grab a good copper pot here, and I'll make just a gallon of Swankey at a time. It is a drunk green, so it doesn't last very long.
So it's not to be kegged up or?
No, sir.
Oh, I see.
So it is ready to drink in about 4 days, and it lasts 2 or 3.
Is that enough?
That looks very good.
Good.
To start with, we're going to put about 4 1/2 cups good sweet wheat bran.
Bran, yeah.
Yes. Now, and a lot of folks would tell you that wheat bran does not make good beer. It's not beer of the well-to-do, but it's perfectly drinkable for a small beer, which is what we're making today. So a small beer is for family consumption. I generally don't serve it to guests, but you were an exception today.
Thank you.
So about 4 1/2 cups of that bran, and then if you would add the spices there that you ground. Here we have hops that we grow here in our garden at the Golden Eagle Inn, and we want a good, generous handful. I like a bit of hop in my small beer.
Okay.
So truly, that is all that there is.
To start this up?
To start this up. So what I'll do now is I'll get about, I've got some water boiling on the fire, and we'll pour about a gallon and a pint or so of water on top of this, and then set it to boil. So now we've got our mash that's been strained, and it has come to blood temperature.
So it's not hot anymore, yeah.
If you stick your finger in, it feels just a little warm.
Just barely.
But what we're going to do now is we're going to add some sugar syrup. Now, you can use molasses in exchange for this 1 cup, but the molasses tends to overpower, I think, that light taste of the star anise and the aniseed. And so what I've done here is I've made a sugar syrup using 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar and 1/4 of a cup of water. And just mix that until that sugar is dissolved.
So what do we need to get it to ferment?
Well, you need some yeast. So we've got some yeast here, and this is flaked yeast. So when we go to Indianapolis to pick up a beer that we serve to our guests in the tap room, we also get barm from the brewers. And so that's that top foam, that slurry that comes up as the beer ferments. And we take that, we can use it to rise bread, but we also dry it. We spread it out thinly on wooden spoons, and we dry it in the sun. And then we flake that off, and we can use that as our yeast.
Right.
And if you want to stir that up just a bit,
Sure.
and that will start to break down. And within 5 minutes or so, we
Really?
should start to see some activity here. So we'll let this set. I'm going to put a towel over the top of it, and we'll come back to it when it's a little happier.
So you set this aside. It's going to start percolating and brewing.
It will start fermenting within, as I said, 5 or 10 minutes, and then what we'll want to do is we'll put it in a jug and we'll bung it.
Yeah.
And you can tie your bung down if you want, because it may just pop off. But you shouldn't put it down too tight. Leave it loose just in case that fermentation does rise up above and it can flow over. After that sets for a couple of days, Swankey, like most small beers, should be drunk within 4 or 5 days, and ready to drink, I should say, and then consumed within 2 or 3 days. It tends to lose its fermentation, it's that effervescence after a few days. But the one thing that you want to do before you start to drink it on that 4th or 5th day, you want to strain it through a cheesecloth. Because all of that activity that happened at the top as it fermented will eventually settle down to the bottom. And that's your emptins. And the wonderful thing about emptins, though, is that you can use it to make bread. In fact, I made this bread here using the emptins, and they look just a little bit like a gravy almost.
Bread and drink all in one?
Yes, sir.
And
Yes,
wonderful
sir.
flavors, and with all we would need from the store or difficulty getting would be, say, the hops, correct?
Yes, the hops could be a problem, and for you, if you're traveling, the spice may be a problem. If you are in the middle of nowhere, it'll be more difficult for you to give spice, but don't despair, because I know a receipt for a Gruit.
A
sir.
Gruit?
Have you had a Gruit before?
I don't know.
A Gruit is an unhopped ale, and it is flavored with herbs. So, in 1516, Reinheitsgebot, which is the German purity law, was declared. And what that meant was that beer could be made only with water, barley, and hops. And so really up until this point, people were brewing with all types of things. They were brewing with herbs and with fruits and with trees and everything that you can imagine. Because everything has yeast and sugar, and it will work if you treat it the right way.
It's got life in it.
Yes, sir, it does indeed. And so when this declaration was made, this purity law came into to being, it really changed beer making. And so a lot of these old ways, kvass and Gose and Gruits, they went by the wayside. But
We can make them today.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
My mutter and Oma, my mother and grandmother, they brewed
Kept
these
those
types
ways?
of things. Yes, sir.
Uh-huh.
And when you met me in the garden earlier today, I was picking some alehoof, which is one of the ways. Alehoof. Creeping Charlie, cat's paw, coin plant, sir.
Really?
Goes by many names, yes. And it grows almost everywhere in Indiana. So it's a wonderful thing to know what to do with and to brew with.
What do you do with it? How do you use it?
Well, let me show you.
Okay.
So here are some hops that you mentioned before, and these will be harder for you to find. And in fact, for us this year, we've had a blight on our hops, and so we've lost quite a few of our hops, or they've been eaten before we get a chance to harvest them, or they just haven't budded at all.
What is eating?
It's hard to know, and not knowing means that we can't really stop it from happening. So unfortunately, we have to make do, and that means that we have to brew another way. So that's where alehoof comes in.
So you would use this sort of as a direct substitute in exactly the same dried?
In fact, the same receipt. You use it fresh, as we made the Swankey, bran, and instead of the spice that you put in, the aniseed and the star anise, I would put in about a quart of fresh, washed, and picked alehoof. Now, I personally like to add a few sprigs of spearmint to it. I think it just gives a nice cooling effect to the ale hoof. And I would put that in and simmer that with my water and bran until the bran drops to the bottom. And once it does that, then I would take it off and strain it through. Now, when you put it in a bowl to come to blood temperature, what you want to do, or what I like to do in fact, is add about another pint of fresh ale hoof and another sprig of spearmint. Almost like you would steep a tea, tea leaves in tea, making tea, and that sort of adds to the flavor, I think. And then, just like we would do with the Swankey, we add either molasses or a sugar syrup and our yeast, and do the same. Jug it, bung it, and in 3 to 4 days, strain it and drink it. And again, the emptins from ale hoof can be used the same way that you use the emptins from Swankey to make bread, and it makes wonderful, good bread.
It seems so simple, and the Swankey was wonderful, refreshing.
Yes, indeed. Well, I think beer in and of itself is simple because it's important. It's healthful. It's good to drink. It's refreshing. It gives us energy in the morning to feel strong and gets us through our day. It's my eldest son likes to say that it's a bit like drinking his daily bread, and so I imagine that to some extent it is. And I think that these small beers, they taste very much like your kitchen, the yeast in your kitchen, and so I think it's a good analogy that he's made. So, Mr. Townsend, I happen to have just a little bit of Gruit left, so why don't I pour you some?
I would love to try this.
So you'll see right away that the color is a little bit different because of the molasses instead of the brown sugar as the sweetener.
Certainly, what one would expect is a small beer. Good flavor, especially when it seems that it's just brewed up with some weeds or whatever you have around, I guess.
Well, I think that in this world today, we are very gifted in using what we have to make do. And I think that this is a receipt that's much older than I and much older than you. And so I think it speaks to how long people have been persevering with what they have.
Well, I'm certain that I will end up using this at some point, probably sooner rather than later. With what I hear is just absolute nothing where I'm going. So,
since you are traveling and you intend to be in such wilderness, I think it might be a good thing while you're in town to visit Mrs. Armstrong. She's a wonderful lady who lives just up the road, and she has lots of knowledge about plants and herbs and uses much beyond brewing.
Well, that sounds interesting because there is no medicine. I have heard of no doctor in the area. So that sounds like something I will definitely need. You'll definitely have to point me in her direction.
Well, I certainly will. But first, before you leave, let me give you some bread to get you started on your way so that you're not leaving with an empty belly.
Mrs. Zimmerman, thank you so much for this amazing information, the wonderful drink and everything. It will help me undoubtedly on my way up north and surviving up there. So I really want to thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm always happy to meet a stranger.
You'll have to excuse me because I have to run and go see Mrs. Armstrong.
Safe travels.
What a wonderful episode, and it was a lot of fun. I really want to thank the folks here at Prairie. They do such a tremendous job of welcoming us and presenting such amazing material. If you're ever in this sort of central Indiana area and you're interested in a historic site, definitely come and visit Prairie. You will enjoy it. I want to thank you for coming along with us as we're experimenting, we're trying these things out, we're tasting these things and smelling these things. We're savoring the flavors and the aromas of the 18th and early 19th century. Now I have to go visit Mrs. Armstrong.